In this video, I would like to tackle two separate issues. They're both fairly short, so I thought it would be good to put them into one. So the first thing I'd like to talk about is coding standards. And the common coding standard for C# is as follows. First of all, we use camel case to identify variables. And let's just do a little check here and see if this is actually what I have done in this application. So here I have a class of quiz variables and I have score, and score is just a single word. Now in camel case, the first letter of a variable is lowercase, and then if there is any second word, then that second word is capitalized and there are no spaces. So score doesn't really count on this example, but question row does. So in the normal convention for C#, question row, lowercase there at the start, no space, and then a capital there. So that is called camel case, and I can just insert that with a comment. Comments, by the way, can be considered part of a coding standard, and it all depends on what the programming team or individual expect. If you're programming in a team, it's very important that you write comments. But speaking for myself, I think it's vital to write comments even if you're just doing a solo project, because you know the months and the years go by and you return to code and it can seem quite impenetrable sometimes. So comments are important. They should be descriptive and they should be fairly brief, otherwise they could take up a lot of room. Now, where do you put them? Here I've put one above that class, and here I've put one at the end of a line. That's something to think about. I'm afraid I'm not going to give you any definitive answers as to what is the best coding standard, but I am trying to tell you what some of the options are and make this specific to C#. Let's move on. There's Pascal case. Pascal case is slightly different from camel case. So the difference is this, is that both words, if there are indeed two words, start with a capital. And in C#, the general convention is that we use Pascal case for classes and constructors. Now, you may not know what a constructor is, and it's outside the realm of this video and course, but this here is a class in C#, and fortunately I have indeed gone with the Pascal case here. So capital Q, capital V, and no space. Other coding standards include the use of underscores, etc. And there is a lot of variation according to what language is being used and also what a team or an organization decides is the correct way forward. Spacing. Spacing is something that's also part of a coding standard, and as you can see here, I tend to sort of go for a vertical stacking, which I find very helpful. I'm not going to provide any particular authority or justification for this, but I do like neat and tidy, and I certainly feel that this is neat and tidy, and I think you'll find a lot of people will use this. So what do I mean by vertical stacking? Well, you see this line here could actually all be written on a single line. Okay, I'm not going to push this too far because I don't want to make a complete mess, but I could, as long as I put in the correct sort of dividing symbols like the semicolons and stuff like that, I could just as easily write that line like that. However, in my view, it's starting to go vertically, it's starting to get quite long, so I'm against it for that reason, and I don't personally feel that it reads that well. So in what we call these C languages, there's often a convention with the curly braces that we have this sort of vertical stack idea going on. So let me just see if I can just correct this back to where it was. So I personally think it's extremely helpful to have the vertical stacking, and I think something's inevitably gone wrong there. but to have, so that curly brace matches that one there, and you can also concertina, that's my word, not the developer's word, that together there to hide it. So vertical stacking of curly braces, and when you have a curly brace, put it on a new line, and then when you write something, write it on a new line below. Also indentation, that's a tab indentation there, and if I do this in Visual Studio, that's usually added automatically. Note again, this is the array that's so crucial to this quiz that is being developed. Well, you see, I've got a vertical stack going on here for the 2D array to try and show that that is one dimension of it, sort of a row, and that's the second row, that's the third row, etc. And I've formatted it like that. Now, here in comments, here's one I prepared earlier, but I've just provided the same line of code. It's commented out with those double slashes, that's why it's in green. But that line of code there, as far as the C# compiler is concerned, it's not going to worry about that. It's perfectly acceptable. But what I'm looking for in this assignment is the argument of, well, is that acceptable to you or to any coding team? And first of all, I'm having to drag the bar across here to actually read it, which I don't think is a good sign. And I personally think it looks messy, particularly as it's a 2D array. I think you're going to get lost in here. And hey, you know, what happens if you miss a comma out? Then you've got a syntax error, which is going to cause a lot of problems and could be hard to spot. So this vertical stacking idea, I think, lends itself very well to this array and coding generally. So it's what I've followed here. So I'm trying to work within this window, roughly, and by the window I mean that sort of, about that sort of width. So if everything that I produce can fit on there, okay, it's not quite there, there we go. I feel that that's good practice from a readability point of view, because by making it a bit less wide, I'm sort of roughly simulating the sort of proportion of an A4 sheet of paper, which human eyes seem to be quite well adjusted to. So yes, so to conclude this then, the two main cases are camel case, which is shown here for variables, and Pascal case for class names and constructors, and also in C# for namespaces, which are these. Phew, I've got that one right as well. Spacing. Okay, so I'm going for this vertical stack here. I've got matching curly braces so that they are vertically aligned, and I feel that that enormously helps my readability. And I'm trying to use short, concise comments. Some are at the end of the line and some are actually above. So that one's above this class here, and that one there is above this method here. So to some extent it's up to you, but I want you to be aware of these coding standards. The second thing I'd like to show you is how we troubleshoot and debug our application. I'm doing this from the perspective of Visual Studio. So let's find the array again. So imagine if I put in 2 commas there by mistake because it's a typo, I should soon be getting some troubleshooting advice here. I've got a red underline here. I've got a little screwdriver that appears there with the quick actions on, and it's all flagging up to me that there is a problem. I often find that what it actually says, i.e. all of these, are sometimes a little bit more help than I need really, and can be confusing. So I prefer to use Mark 1 human eyeball and actually just try and identify the syntax error manually. So I'm talking really about IntelliSense and the troubleshooting aspects of it that occur automatically. So that's certainly something to consider. The other thing to consider is actually analysing the code as the program executes, and we do that in Visual Studio with breakpoints. And believe it or not, I didn't actually plan this, but this code does actually have a problem in it. So the problem is in the check answer. So what I've done is I've added a breakpoint. So what you do is, I'll just take it away there, but you choose a line, you right click, and you go to breakpoint, insert a breakpoint, and you get the red dot there. And that means that every time that we reach this point in the code, we get the opportunity to examine what is happening in the code. So you need to be confident that you've selected the right place for the breakpoint, but it's going to tell you what the variables are in memory at that moment. And so this is a really useful part of debugging. So I start the quiz. And as I just said, I genuinely actually don't quite know what the problem is here, so I may or may not successfully resolve it. What is important, though, is the process that I'm going through here. So we're just giving the code a couple of seconds to compile, and I think because I made a few of those formatting changes, it took a little bit longer there. I take the quiz, I'm just going to blast in any old answer, and here, just as I've clicked, check answer method is executing, and we've hit the breakpoint. So this is the bit that's really interesting for you. It's this bit down here on the bottom left, and here we have these different variables. Okay, you can ignore this because that's referring to this particular object, but this is button text answer, so this is what was on the button. This is column index answer. This is getting the variable from the array, and I is the question counter that I'm using. I'm on 0 because it's the first question and we index arrays from 0, so that looks right. The answer 9 on the button is what I was expecting. I saw that on the form. And can we just drill in here? Whoa. Into column index answer, which is a variable that I've set up to look through the 2D array, and you can see here all of the different values. Okay, and so we should be looking at the first column of this, and the question was what is 9 cubed, and then following on from that the answers there, and 05 is the correct answer. Now at this point in the code there isn't a problem, so I'm going to click continue. There comes the message box, and here's the next question. So I go to 4, I come to this breakpoint again. You'll notice that I has now incremented to 1 because I'm now on the second question. Position 0 was the first question, 1 is the second question, and there's still no problem here. There's the little box there, choose aardvark. Now I'm on to 2 and I click continue. The quiz is continuing, and I think it's on this one that things go a bit peculiar. Okay, I is now 3. No, we're carrying on. My apologies. This is the booby, and there we go. I've got an unhandled exception. So it would seem to me that the problem here is, I think, the value of I, and for some reason we have gone out of range in the array. So I'm just going to dig around in here and see if I can actually find out what it is. But I promise you, I'm not actually making this up. This error has crept into my code during this unit when I've been fiddling about with it and demonstrating it. So I think probably what the problem is that this value here on the left in these brackets, 0 to 1 to 2 to 3, now I is on 4, and C# is saying, well, hang on a minute, you know, in this 2D array, one of the elements doesn't have a value 4. So there isn't a fifth question in this. So that is most likely the problem, that I've set a value incorrectly in my count to decide when the quiz should end. And if I click continue there, I can't actually continue the app. It has stopped because it's hit this problem. So my troubleshooting would focus in on that area to find out if I'm counting the number of questions incorrectly. I won't show you that, but I hope that that's been a useful video. Thank you for watching.